In 2014, Elizabeth Holmes appeared on the cover of Fortune magazine. She was 30 years old. Her net worth was estimated at $4.5 billion. Her company Theranos was valued at $9 billion. The pitch was simple. A device called the Edison could run 240 blood tests from a single drop of blood from a finger prick. No needles, results in hours. Cost a fraction of conventional labs. Walgreens had signed a partnership deal. The board included 2 former U.S. Secretaries of State, a former Secretary of Defense, and a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The only problem, the Edison didn't work. It had never worked.
Holmes founded Theranos in 2003. At the age of 19, after dropping out of Stanford, she modeled herself consciously on Steve Jobs, the black turtleneck, the reality distortion field, the messianic certainty. She had a gift for investor relations, a genuine charisma, and a story that combined healthcare, technology, and the democratization of medicine in a way that made billionaires want to believe. George Shultz, the former Secretary of State, introduced her to Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch invested $125 million. He later wrote it off.
What was actually happening inside Theranos was the opposite of the public narrative. The Edison device consistently produced inaccurate results. Employees who raised concerns were threatened with NDAs and legal action. When Theranos agreed to run blood tests for Walgreens and Safeway pharmacies, they used conventional Siemens analyzers for most of the tests, the same machines available at any commercial lab, while diluting the samples, which introduced its own inaccuracies. They were running a conventional blood test lab and calling it revolutionary technology.
Tyler Schultz, grandson of George Shultz, joined Theranos in 2013. He was 22 years old and believed in the mission. Within months, he realized the results were unreliable. He raised it internally. He was told the problems were being fixed. He eventually went to the California Department of Public Health with his concerns. Theranos found out. Holmes called his grandfather. George Shultz called Tyler and told him to stop. Tyler hired a lawyer and continued. He later became the key whistleblower in the Wall Street Journal investigation.
On October 15, 2015, John Carreyrou published an investigation in the Wall Street Journal under the headline, "Hot Startup Theranos Has Struggled with Its Blood Test Technology." The article, based on interviews with former employees and regulators, revealed that Theranos ran only about 15 of its 240 advertised tests on its own devices. Holmes appeared on CNBC the same day and called the report factually and scientifically wrong. She said the journal was being irresponsible. She said Theranos' technology was real. The stock she was protecting was worth $9 billion.
The regulatory response was swift. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services conducted an inspection in 2015 and found that Theranos' Newark facility posed immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. In January 2016, CMS proposed revoking Theranos' laboratory certification and banning Holmes from operating any lab for 2 years. Holmes agreed to the ban rather than contest it. She did not admit wrongdoing. The ban covered running a lab. It did not cover the investor fraud that had already happened.
In 2018, the SEC charged Holmes and former Theranos president Sunny Balwani with massive fraud, raising more than $700 million from investors through false claims about the company's technology. Holmes settled with the SEC without admitting wrongdoing, paid a $500,000 fine, and agreed to a 10-year ban on serving as an officer or director of a public company. The DOJ then filed criminal charges. In June 2018, Holmes and Balwani were indicted on wire fraud and conspiracy charges. Holmes' defense: she genuinely believed in the technology. She was deceived by Balwani. She was doing her best.
On January 3, 2022, the jury returned its verdict. Holmes was convicted on 4 counts of fraud against investors. She was acquitted on counts related to fraud against patients. The jury deadlocked on 3 other counts. She was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison and ordered to pay $452 million in restitution, money that will in practice be difficult to recover. She reported to prison in May 2023. Sunny Balwani, tried separately, was convicted on all 12 counts and sentenced to nearly 13 years. The patients who received false diagnoses, including false negatives for HIV and false positives for cancer, received no criminal remedy. The civil litigation is ongoing.